Welcome to a deep dive that might just change how you see the world, you know? Today, we're going to be unpacking the predictions and insights of Andrew Bustamante,
Oh, yeah.
a former CIA spy with some, shall we say, unconventional views about the future.
Yeah, this guy's got some really interesting takes, especially when it comes to the United States.
Exactly. And what's so interesting about Bustamante is that he's not just, throwing out opinions.
Mm.
He's drawing on his years of experience.
Yeah, from being in the intelligence world, right? Where
Exactly.
you have to, decipher all these global power dynamics and, figure out, the hidden agendas and motivations of different countries and people.
It's like he's seen behind the curtain, and now he's, ready to share what he's learned with the rest of us.
Definitely. And one of the most striking things he says is that the U.S. is going through, this rough adolescence.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's almost stuck in that awkward phase of middle school where you're not sure who you are or where you fit in.
I could say.
And he sees this playing out in how the country is grappling with its identity, struggling to, truly live up to its ideals of equality and democracy.
And ultimately coming up short in providing equal opportunities for everyone. Yeah.
Yeah, sadly, that's kind of the point he's making. And this adolescence analogy, it's more than just a clever turn of phrase. It's like Bustamante is saying that this internal struggle is manifesting in real-world events.
Like what kind of events?
Well, think about it. The growing political polarization, for one thing.
Yeah.
How divided everything feels these days.
Definitely.
And the economic anxieties that a lot of people are experiencing, that sense that the American dream is slipping away.
Yeah, Bustamante worries that all of this instability will have a ripple effect.
Exactly. It's going to impact future generations and limit their choices and their opportunities.
Yeah, it makes you wonder if he's onto something. Like, is this adolescent phase just a temporary setback, or is it a sign of deeper problems?
Right. And for Bustamante, this isn't just some abstract intellectual concern.
Yeah, it's personal for him, isn't it?
He's a father.
Right.
And he's openly said that one of the big reasons he's planning to leave the U.S. by 2027 is to secure a better future for his kids.
It's like he's seeing these warning signs, and he wants to get his family to higher ground before things potentially get worse.
Exactly. And that raises a really interesting question for all of us listening.
What do you see when you look at the U.S. today?
Yeah. Does it feel like a country in turmoil, wrestling with its identity and kind of unsure of its place in the world?
Does Bustamante's adolescence metaphor resonate with you, or do you see things differently?
Definitely something to think about. And Bustamante's concerns about the future of the U.S., they're really intertwined with his analysis of global power dynamics.
Especially the relationship between the U.S. and China.
Exactly. He's convinced that China is on a trajectory to reach economic parity with the U.S.
If not surpass it entirely.
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it? He lays out two main scenarios.
Okay, what are they?
So either we reach a state of relative economic equality between the two superpowers, or China just edges ahead and becomes the dominant economic force.
And neither outcome is making him particularly optimistic, is it?
No, not really. He believes this power shift is actually going to make both countries more vulnerable.
How so?
Because they'll become the primary targets for each other's anxieties and ambitions, It's almost like they're locked in this high-stakes game of chicken on the world stage.
It's a scary thought, and to understand just how quickly things can change. He uses an analogy that I think really hits home. Google versus Yahoo.
Oh, yeah.
Remember Yahoo? It
Yeah.
was the dominant search engine, the go-to for everything online, and then Google came along and completely changed the game practically overnight.
It's amazing how quickly things can shift.
Exactly, and that's what Bustamante is suggesting could happen on the global stage, with China potentially taking the lead in the economic arena.
And it really makes you wonder, how would that change the world as we know it? Think about the impact on everything from international trade to military alliances.
To the very ideas and values that shape global culture, it's a big deal.
Huge. And then just when you think things can't get any more intense, Bustamante throws in another curveball.
Okay, I'm listening.
He believes that World War III is already happening.
But we don't see, tanks rolling across borders or anything.
Right, it's not the traditional image of war that we have.
What does he mean?
He sees it as a war of proxy nations.
For proxy nation.
Where major powers like the U.S. and Russia or China and the West, they're engaging in conflicts indirectly by supporting opposing sides in these smaller regional conflicts.
So it's like a more subtle but still powerful form of warfare.
Exactly. It allows these superpowers to exert their influence and advance their agendas without actually going to war directly with each other.
Interesting. So what would be an example of this?
Well, the conflict in Ukraine is a prime example.
Okay.
While the fighting is happening on Ukrainian soil, Bustamante sees it as this proxy war between the West, which is back in Ukraine,
Right.
and Russia.
And he's predicting that we're likely to see a similar situation unfold with Taiwan and China.
Yeah, with both superpowers vying for control and influence in the region.
It's a tense standoff for sure, one that could escalate pretty quickly.
Definitely this idea of a war of proxy nations. It really challenges our understanding of what war even looks like in the 21st century.
Yeah, it's almost like we're seeing a new kind of global chess game with moves being made on multiple boards simultaneously.
It's complex and unsettling, for sure. It makes you think, are we already living through World War III without even realizing it? And what does that mean for the future?
It's a lot to take in, but amidst all this talk of global upheaval, Bustamante does offer some practical advice for those of us just trying to navigate our everyday lives.
Oh, yeah. What's that?
He boils it down to one simple yet powerful message: take action.
Take action. Okay, I like that. But what does he mean by that exactly?
Well, he's not talking about like grand sweeping gestures.
Okay.
He emphasizes that it doesn't even have to be the quote-unquote right action.
So you're saying it's more about the act of doing something rather than worrying about whether it's the perfect thing.
Yeah, and in fact, he argues that making mistakes is actually a crucial part of the learning process.
Oh, I see.
He believes that by taking action, even if it leads to initial failures, you gain valuable experience and you set yourself apart from the competition.
The competition?
Yeah, the people who are often paralyzed by fear or indecision.
It's the people who are just stuck, you know?
Exactly. And what's so fascinating here is that Bustamante sees action itself as a form of courage.
I like that.
It's about stepping outside your comfort zone, experimenting, and pushing your own boundaries, regardless of the outcome.
It's like he's saying, don't be afraid to fail.
Exactly.
Oh,
So we're putting the question to you: what's one small action you can take today, inspired by Bustamante's advice?
yeah, it could be anything, really.
Starting a new hobby, reaching out to someone you admire, finally tackling that project you've been putting off,
What matters is taking that first step.
however tentative it might be.
Now, for all his talk about taking action, Bustamante also has some pretty intriguing, even controversial thoughts about human nature.
Oh, really?
Like what?
Especially when it comes to the idea of equality.
Okay, this is where things get really thought-provoking.
He admits that his own perspective on equality has shifted over time.
How so?
He used to believe in its possibility,
Right.
but now he sees it as a noble ideal that often clashes with a more fundamental human desire, the desire to be better than others.
Interesting. So he's saying that even though we might strive for equality on a societal level, there's this inherent drive within us to want to stand out.
To excel, to be recognized as somehow superior.
Yeah, and he argues that deep down, people are constantly seeking advantages, even while publicly advocating for equality.
It's like there's this disconnect between our stated values and our underlying motivations.
And he sees this playing out in all facets of society, from personal relationships to professional rivalries.
He even connects it back to his analysis of politicians, suggesting that their desire for power and control often outweighs their commitment to serving the public good.
It's a cynical view, maybe, but one that's hard to dismiss entirely, especially when you look at the state of political discourse today.
It makes you think about all those moments where you've seen this dynamic play out, maybe even in your own life.
Yeah, have you ever noticed that gap between what people say they believe and how they actually behave?
This is just the tip of the iceberg with Bustamante.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the predictions and insights of Andrew Bustamante.
So far, we've really dug into his perspective on America going through this, like, adolescence and the whole power shift between the U.S. and China.
Right, and that whole idea that World War III is kind of already underway, just not in the way we typically imagine it.
Definitely a lot to unpack, and we also talked about his advice to just, take action, even if it means making mistakes.
And let's not forget that thought-provoking perspective on equality and whether our desire to, get ahead sometimes overshadows our desire for a level playing field.
Absolutely, a lot of food for thought there.
Yeah.
But now get this, Bustamante also has a lot to say about technology.
Oh, really? What does he think?
Well, he believes it's going to keep advancing at this, crazy pace, leading to some amazing opportunities, but also challenges we haven't even thought of yet.
It's hard to even imagine what's next sometimes.
I know, right? But Bustamante is particularly fascinated by artificial intelligence, or AI.
AI, everyone's talking about it, but what's his take?
What's interesting is he doesn't see it as this, ominous force that's going to replace human intelligence altogether.
So he's not like all doom and gloom about it.
No, he actually sees AI as a tool that can enhance our capabilities.
I can see that.
It's like having this super intelligent research assistant by your side, helping you solve complex problems and make better decisions.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Imagine what that could mean for fields like medicine, scientific research, even just everyday problem solving.
That's a good point, but I guess there's a flip side to that too,
Of
right?
course, as AI gets more sophisticated, it also becomes a prime target for hackers and anyone with bad intentions.
That's scary.
Imagine the chaos if some rogue AI got control of like essential infrastructure or started manipulating financial markets.
It doesn't even bear thinking about.
It's a double-edged sword for sure. And that's why Bustamante believes that cybersecurity is going to become like one of the most critical industries in the world,
Oh, yeah.
as individuals, businesses, and governments all race to protect their data and systems.
Cybersecurity is definitely a hot topic these days.
He even suggests that cybersecurity skills will become as essential as literacy and numeracy in the 21st century.
Wow. As important as knowing how to read and write.
That's what he's saying is like learning a new language, but instead of words, you're learning how to defend yourself in the digital world.
That's a really interesting way to think about it.
So if you're looking for a career path that's both in high demand and comes with a good dose of adrenaline, cybersecurity might be something to consider.
I'll keep that in mind, but let's shift gears a bit and talk about the future of work. I'm curious what Bustamante has to say about that.
Well, he believes that the traditional 9-to-5 job is becoming a thing of the past.
Really? So, like, the whole office cubicle thing is on its way out?
He thinks so.
Yeah.
He predicts we'll see more and more people working as freelancers, consultants, and independent contractors.
Essentially becoming their own bosses.
Exactly, leveraging their skills to create their own opportunities. He even coined the term solopreneur to describe this new type of worker.
Solopreneur. I like that.
This shift towards solopreneurship definitely has its perks.
Like what?
Well, greater flexibility, autonomy, and the potential to earn more money.
That all sounds good, but I imagine there's some downsides too, right?
Of course, it also requires a ton of self-discipline and the ability to navigate a constantly changing marketplace.
So you got to be really adaptable.
Bustamante believes a number of factors are driving this shift.
Like what?
Well, the rise of automation, for one thing, which is changing the nature of a lot of traditional jobs,
That makes sense.
and the growing desire for work-life balance and personal fulfillment.
People want more than just a paycheck.
Exactly. It's like they're saying, I want work that's meaningful and fits into my life, not the other way around.
So how does this whole vision of the future of work sit with you? Does it excite you or make you a little nervous?
Are you ready to embrace the solopreneur lifestyle? Or do you find comfort in the stability of a traditional job?
That's a tough one. I guess it depends. Let's move on to geopolitics. I'm always fascinated by that. What does Bustamante see happening on the world stage?
Well, he paints a picture of a world that's becoming increasingly multipolar, with power shifting away from the traditional Western powers.
So not just the U.S. calling all the shots anymore.
He sees China, India, and other emerging economies stepping onto the world stage with more assertiveness.
I can definitely see that happening.
And he predicts this shift will lead to more competition and instability as nations kind of jostle for position in this new world order.
It sounds like a recipe for conflict.
He even suggests we might see new alliances and rivalries forming as countries realign themselves based on shared interests rather than the old ideological divides of the past.
So like the old rules don't apply anymore.
Exactly. And what's fascinating is that Bustamante believes the U.S. needs to adapt to this new reality by becoming more flexible, pragmatic, and willing to collaborate with a wider range of partners.
So not just sticking to the old alliances.
He's not saying the U.S. should step back from the world stage, but that it needs to evolve its approach.
Be more open to new possibilities.
He also argues that the U.S. needs to invest more in diplomacy and what's known as soft power.
Soft power.
Yeah, building relationships, fostering cultural exchange, and promoting its values through persuasion rather than force.
So it's more about winning hearts and minds than flexing military muscle.
It's like he's saying that military might alone isn't enough in this new world.
So let's put it to you. Does Bustamante's vision of a multipolar world ring true to you?
And how do you think the U.S. should navigate this evolving global landscape?
It's a big question for sure, but let's move on to something a bit more concrete. What about the future of our planet's resources? Does Bustamante have any predictions about that?
Oh yeah, he paints a pretty intense picture, actually. He believes the world is heading towards a period of increased scarcity.
Scarcity of what
He
exactly?
points to the growing global population and the fact that developing countries are consuming more resources.
Which puts a strain on essential things like water, food, and energy.
Exactly. And he predicts that this scarcity will lead to more competition, conflict, and even war as nations and groups clash over dwindling resources.
That's a pretty grim outlook.
It's a sobering thought, but it highlights just how urgent it is to find more sustainable ways to live and manage our planet's resources.
So what does he suggest we do?
Well, he believes we need to get serious about finding new ways to produce food, energy, and other essentials.
More efficiently and sustainably.
Right. He also advocates for developing technologies to conserve and recycle existing resources.
It sounds like a call to action not just for governments and corporations, but for individuals as well.
Exactly what are you doing to prepare for a future where resources might be more limited?
That's a good question to ask ourselves.
Are you making an effort to reduce your consumption? Are you supporting businesses committed to sustainability? Are you exploring ways to conserve energy or invest in renewable sources?
There's a lot we can all do, even in small ways.
The Bustamante's predictions are definitely a mix of optimism and realism.
Yeah, how so?
Well, he recognizes the immense challenges we face, but he also believes we have the ingenuity and resilience to overcome them.
It's like finding that balance between acknowledging the problems and still having hope for the future.
Exactly. And he sees the key to navigating the future in embracing change, adapting to new realities, and focusing on finding solutions rather than just dwelling on the problems.
It's a message of hope, even in the face of some pretty daunting challenges.
For sure. But let's explore his thoughts on something a bit more abstract: the future of human consciousness and our potential for spiritual growth.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What does he have to say about that?
Well, Bustamante believes that as technology advances and we become even more interconnected, we're going to become more aware of our interconnectedness as human beings.
It's like we're all part of this giant web of life, and technology is making us more aware of those connections.
Exactly. And he predicts that this growing awareness is going to lead to a shift in consciousness,
A shift in what way?
a move away from individualism towards a more collective and compassionate way of being.
So like a more we're all in this together kind of mindset.
He even suggests we might see new forms of spirituality and consciousness-raising practices emerge as people seek to connect with something larger than themselves.
It's fascinating to think about how technology might be pushing us to ask those bigger questions about our place in the universe and our connection to each other.
Definitely. So how do you think technology is going to shape the future of human consciousness?
Will it lead to greater connection and compassion, or could it further isolate and divide us? And what role do you think spirituality and consciousness are going to play in shaping the future? It's fascinating to think about, isn't it?
Bustamante's predictions are this incredible blend of technological innovation, geopolitical shifts, and even spiritual evolution. They offer a glimpse into a future that's full of potential and uncertainty.
It's like he's challenging us to think differently, adapt, and take an active role in shaping a future that's both sustainable and fulfilling.
Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive with Andrew Bustamante.
The former CIA spy who's now giving us some pretty mind-blowing predictions about the future.
We've covered a ton, haven't we? From America's adolescence and China's rise to the whole changing landscape of work.
Oh, and that potential global resource crisis we talked about.
And who could forget his take on human nature? That maybe our desire to be, better than others is a stronger driving force than we like to admit.
Definitely some thought-provoking stuff there. We also explored his thoughts on the rapid evolution of AI, the growing importance of cybersecurity, and that shift towards a multipolar world.
It's a lot to process for sure, but now in this final part, we're going to shift gears a bit and focus on some of the personal lessons Bustamante has learned.
Oh, okay. From his experiences.
Yeah, both as a CIA spy and as someone who just, observes human behavior really closely.
I'm all ears.
One of the biggest things he emphasizes is the importance of mental resilience, adaptability, and the ability to perform under pressure.
Makes sense for a spy, right?
Absolutely. But he argues that these skills aren't just for spies, they're essential for anyone navigating the complexities of modern life.
So, like, these are life skills, basically.
He draws on his experiences in high-stakes situations where clear thinking, rapid decision-making, and emotional control were literally matters of survival.
I bet he's got some wild stories.
Oh, he does. He's got these incredible anecdotes about learning to manage fear, overcome adversity, and stay focused, even in the face of danger.
So he's not just talking the talk, he's walked the walk.
Exactly. And what's so valuable is that he doesn't just leave it at that.
Hmm.
He translates these lessons into practical advice that anyone can use.
Like what kind of advice?
He offers tips on developing mental toughness, building resilience, and staying calm under pressure.
Okay, so like practical strategies?
He's a big advocate for mindfulness, self-awareness, and the ability to regulate your emotions.
Interesting. So it's not just about being tough, it's also about being in tune with yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He's also a firm believer in the importance of physical fitness, proper nutrition, and getting enough sleep.
That's good advice for everyone.
He argues that these things aren't just about looking good. They play a vital role in maintaining mental and emotional well-being.
It's all connected, right?
It's like he's saying you can't be mentally sharp if you're running on empty.
True enough, but what about other skills? Does he talk about anything else besides mental resilience?
Oh, yeah. Bustamante also shares some fascinating insights on observation, critical thinking, and what he calls reading people.
Reading people.
He honed these skills during his time in the CIA, but he believes they're just as valuable in everyday life.
I can see that.
Think about it, whether you're negotiating a business, deal building relationships, or just trying to understand why people do the things they do. These skills can give you a real advantage.
So how do we get better at reading people?
He gives some really practical tips on how to improve your observation skills, how to analyze information with a critical eye, and how to spot deception or manipulation.
Those are some useful skills.
He encourages us to become more aware of our surroundings, pay attention to those nonverbal cues, and always question our assumptions.
It's like becoming a detective in your own life.
Bustamante also stresses the power of strong relationships and building a network of people you can trust.
That makes sense.
He learned the value of teamwork and collaboration during his time in the CIA, and he believes those principles are crucial for success in any field.
So it's not all about being a lone wolf.
Exactly. He encourages everyone to invest in building genuine connections, to be generous and helpful, and to surround yourself with people who support your goals and challenge you to grow.
So find your tribe, basically.
It's like he's saying that success isn't just about what you know, it's about who you know and how you connect with them.
That's a good point. But as we wrap up this deep dive, let's circle back to Bustamante's parting question.
The one that really gets you thinking.
If striving for equality isn't our primary motivator, then what truly drives human ambition and societal progress?
It's a tough one for sure. It doesn't have an easy answer, but it's one worth thinking about.
What is it about human nature that pushes us to strive for something more, to create, to innovate, to build a better future?
Is it a need to improve our lives and the lives of those around us? A thirst for knowledge, a yearning for meaning, or maybe a desire to leave a lasting legacy?
Or could it be something else entirely, a force we haven't quite figured out yet?
Maybe it's a combination of individual ambition, collective aspirations, and that fundamental drive to push the boundaries of what's possible.
We may never have a definitive answer.
But the very act of asking the question forces us to confront our assumptions about ourselves.
And to consider the forces that shape our world.
And that, at its core, is the power of taking a deep dive.
It's not about finding all the answers.
It's about sparking curiosity, challenging our perspectives, and encouraging us to keep exploring the complexities of human experience.
So as you go about your day, keep Bustamante's insights in mind. Think about how you can build your mental resilience, sharpen your observation skills, and nurture those meaningful relationships.
And most importantly, don't stop asking those big questions.
The ones that make you rethink your assumptions and see the world in a new light.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you found it as thought-provoking and insightful as we have.
Until next time, keep diving deeper.